Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of Two Wise Guys. Today's Saturday, February 24th, 2018. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. My co host, Dan, could not be here today, so it's just me running the ship, and we're just going to get a couple housekeeping things out of the way for starters. For those of you who are watching for the first time, we just want to welcome you to the show. It's a show centered around thoughtful discussion, current events, news, pretty much a wide range of topics, anywhere from science, technology, faith, news, sports, conspiracies, pop culture, pretty much everything but the kitchen sink. Nothing's off limits for us, and we just want to center everything around thoughtful discussion. The only rules that we really have on the show are to keep it civil and have a good time. If you guys want to join in the conversation in the chat room, just feel free to jump in at any time to the right of the video frame. Also, if you guys are enjoying our channel, we just want to encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you have ideas for show topics, just go ahead and send us a message at twowiseguys.org/contact. From there, you can also check out previous episodes, search through all of the show notes, find our side projects, and keep up to date as announcements are made. We also have podcasts that are available for those of you who don't have time, or you just don't want to sit down and you don't want to watch an hour-long video. You're in luck. We've launched the Two Wise Guys podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. The links are going to be in the show notes, so check them out. Again, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and if you're feeling super generous, you can always give us a good review to help us move on up in the listing for the platforms. So let's jump into the show. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our first story here. So the first story is that the Democrats have released their own memo, sort of like a counter memo to what the Republicans released a few weeks ago. The congressional Democrats, they basically are rebutting the GOP claims that the FBI and the Department of Justice misused federal surveillance resources against President Trump's 2016 campaign. For those of you who've been living under a rock, basically there were allegations so far that there's been Russian collusion where the Russians got involved with the election, the U.S. election, and evidently helped Trump win somehow. I'm not sure how that works, but so the FBI, to continue with the Democrat memo, the FBI and the DOJ officials did not abuse, the memo says that the FBI and DOJ officials did not abuse the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is also called FISA. It also says that they didn't omit any material information or subvert in any way. Basically saying that they didn't do anything illegal. So again, for those of you who are familiar with the GOP memo that came out, it basically showed evidence that the FBI as well as others participated together to basically circumvent the laws of the country to allow for them to be able to set up surveillance against people in the Trump campaign. So, which is really interesting because the excuse that they used was Russian collusion, but they had no proof, no evidence to show, so they sort of falsified things. Basically, the Democrat memo is a response to that GOP memo. Again, it's just really crazy how everything seems to be just smoke and mirrors, really. Donald Trump did tweet out, he said that the Democrat memo was a response of government surveillance abuses and it's a total political and legal bust. He says it just confirms all the terrible things that were done. It's so illegal. And I'm just going to quote here from the Democrat memo here. It says, in fact, the Department of Justice and the FBI would have been remiss in their duty to protect the country had they not sought a FISA warrant and repeated renewals to conduct temporary surveillance of Carter Page, someone the FBI assessed to be an agent of the Russian government. The rebuttal, basically that's what the rebuttal said. So in other words, the Democrat memo is saying it's okay to commit illegal, unconstitutional acts as long as it is against the bad guys, whoever they are. It's pretty much in your face, and just really, I don't know. For someone like me who's not very familiar with all of the legal workings surrounding this, it's really it can be a challenge because you read both sides' arguments and they both seem pretty compelling because, again, I'm not familiar with legal jargon. I'm not familiar with how all of these things work, but and I think that's sort of the way that it's designed to be. It's basically meant to confuse the layman who's not familiar with all these things, so that we're almost, you and I are not really aware of what the truth is. My honest assessment, my honest opinion is that both sides are really trying to I don't know, doctor the evidence. I don't know if it's I don't know if that's the right word, but both sides are really trying to gain my allegiance, your allegiance, the American public's allegiance. And what they're trying to do is to have us take sides. Personally, for me, I sort of step back from all of those things, and it's really about who's doing what's right, and it's really hard, because of like I said, this is just been a bunch of smoke and mirrors to where it's just really confusing. So for me, I really try not to take sides because I don't have the information. So what I do is just look at the information that's been presented and try to give it my best assessment. And to this point, to this day, at this point, I am more inclined to believe more of the information that was in the GOP's memo, because it's it seems like it's all sort of recorded and written down. It's almost like there's been like a I don't know what you call it, like a record of the events that have taken place, and it's sort of just giving it a blow by blow, step by step view of that, whereas the Democrat memo seems to be focusing on just opposing what was already released by the GOP memo. You can see I'm getting confused by who's saying what here, even as I'm doing this video. So this is just really pretty difficult to sift through all of the evidence. But again, I'm more inclined to believe the GOP, just because their evidence is really laid out really well. And that's one thing that I've really been learning to do in recent years of my life, is to really try to look at the facts, look at what's been documented, what's been proven in different situations. So there's been fewer times where I'm willing to just sort of take somebody's word for what they're saying, even people that I trust, even people that are close, even people that are family members or friends. Really, at this point, I'm not willing to take anybody's word for things. And I'll give you an example. I used to be really into watching this show on the History Channel called Ancient Aliens, because they showed these really interesting conspiracy theories, and they presented things in such a way that you really believe what they're saying. And I ended up watching a YouTube video that was actually very well documented. So in other words, the YouTube video presented the documentation and evidence and like paperwork, articles, white papers, scientific studies. All of it was documented. And basically this YouTube video would go through different scenarios that were presented by the Ancient Aliens show and basically rebut those assertions that they were making, that Ancient Aliens was making. And it was really great because the guy who made this video was very thorough, and he actually, in the bottom corner of his screen, he would put like little numbers, and in his show notes he basically had all of the links to the scientific articles. These are scientific articles. These are things that have been proven by science. These things are recorded, and again, this is like mainstream science stuff that he was posting up. And the interesting thing, as I went through it all, time and time again, I was finding that he was right and that Ancient Aliens was wrong, and that in so many cases, this show Ancient Aliens was actually not only misrepresenting the facts, but in some cases they were twisting the facts, and in other cases were completely false facts that were shown on the sort of to prove their Ancient Aliens theory to be true. Just complete lies. And basically ever since I saw that video and saw that documentation, I really haven't been able to watch another Ancient Aliens show. And not that I really believed everything that I saw in Ancient Aliens before, but I sort of watched it because I had this assumption in the back of my mind that some of the stuff here is true. There's definitely fringe topics that aren't covered by the mainstream for whatever reason. Maybe they have an agenda and they're trying to keep things out of the public eye. But what I found is that an overwhelming majority of the information that's presented by this show is patently false or doctored in some way. So it's just, that was really upsetting to me, but I'm very thankful because it was an eye-opening experience to see that information. Excuse me. And it really has brought a new meaning to the term of questioning everything that is all the information that is put before us. And again, I think it can only help for us to be naturally inquisitive, and to test facts, to test information that have been presented to us, and to verify if it's true or not. Now, obviously, we can't do that for everything, but there are certain things where it's very important, excuse me, to do that. And I just want to really encourage you guys to pursue truth in every area of your life, not just in the news, not just in your everyday life, as far as like stories that you read, but also where the places that you work, where you go to church, if you do go to church, or if you're not religious, the religious type, to continue to really pursue truth, whatever that result comes to. Again, just question everything to see what comes out of it. And I think you won't regret it, because you're going to find yourself to really be thinking more and more and more. All right, let's move into topic number 2. I'm calling this Bullies and Victims. And this is out of the New York Post. I'm just going to go ahead and screen share this article with you guys. So the headline is "Bullied NFL Lineman Posts Shotgun Photo Forces High School to Close." And again, this is out of the New York Post. For those of you who are football fans who watch the NFL, you may be familiar with Jonathan Martin. He was, a couple years ago, he was a member of the Miami Dolphins football team, and he was essentially, the allegations were that he was bullied by several other members of the team, who ended up getting suspended for extended periods of time. And Jonathan Martin himself is actually no longer in the NFL. He left and retired. But here's the story. Basically, he posted a chilling Instagram story that forced the high school to close. On Thursday, Martin caught the attention of school officials with a story that featured a photo of a shotgun and the names of former Dolphins teammates Richie Incognito and Mike Pouncey, as well as the Los Angeles area high school Harvard Westlake, and which he actually attended. The 28-year-old was taken into custody on Friday, as ABC reported. And I just want to share with you this image here. It is a pretty chilling image when you look at it. So you can see there's a picture of a shotgun laying on a bed. Ostensibly it's his. I don't know whose bed it is, but there's shotgun shells, and he's tagged what looks to be the names of his former teammates, Richie Incognito and a few others, and Mike, including Mike Pouncey. And then he also has a little hashtag Harvard Westlake on the shotgun and hashtag Miami Dolphins on the shotgun. And in little red letters, you can see in the bottom here, when you're a bully victim and a coward, your options are suicide or revenge. This just really is kind of disappointing to see from somebody who was in the NFL. It's I mean, this guy definitely seems like he's struggling with a little bit of, he definitely has some issues, but basically he's largely been out of the public spotlight since retiring in 2015 after a brief stint with the Panthers. In 2016, the biracial athlete revealed that he had tried committing suicide multiple times throughout his life, and was not comfortable growing up in the ritzy Los Angeles area he and his parents moved to when he was 10 years old. He says neither black nor white people accept you because they don't understand you. It takes away your self-confidence, your self-worth, your sanity. It's just very unfortunate to see things like this happen, where a high-profile individual, a relatively high-profile individual, makes a social media post, especially so close in proximity or in time to the recent tragedy that we just saw at the high school in Florida, where 17 people lost their lives. So just thoughts and prayers go out to this guy, who definitely seems to be having his issues. Hopefully that he can get it sorted out. It's good that they took him in. So it's, again, the ABC News is reporting that he was taken into custody on Friday, which I think is really, really good. And that sort of touches on a topic that Dan and I brought up in our last show last weekend. And that is, what are the things that you can do to sort of prevent future tragedies like the one that happened at this high school? Because, again, like we mentioned, this shooter at this high school had all the warning signs of somebody who was gonna do some crazy stuff. He had crazy social media posts. He had run-ins with the law, multiple, I think 30 plus times his house was visited by sheriff's deputies. So it was, and not to mention, there were several FBI, what do you call it? Several people called the FBI, contacted the FBI, and submitted basically what they thought. They thought that he was having issues, and that there was quite a bit of concern, where the FBI admitted later that they did not follow up properly on this shooter. And likely they could have made an impact. Now, in our previous show, as you may remember, Dan and I did talk about this and what can be done. And one of the things that we brought up was, hey, let's get these people help. Like, if you can't necessarily just arrest somebody for making posts on social media. Now you can, but that's not what happened with this guy. But at the same time, let's get some psychological help. Let's get some maybe get people who are struggling with these type of issues, let's get them some help, psychiatric help. Let's pay, maybe as a taxpayer, I would be more than okay with my tax dollars going to pay for people like these to be able to go and get the help that they need to recover mentally from what they're dealing with. And it looks like with this Martin guy, Jonathan Martin, the NFL football player, that he was taken into custody. Now, I don't know, I can't necessarily speak to whether or not they're going to get him psychiatric help. I would assume that would be part of them taking him in. I would hope, because with the these things this social media post is very, very disturbing. So again, I just hope that that's what they're doing. I would really like to see more things like that, where we're able to give help where it's needed to these to people who are struggling mentally. It talks about NBC's the amount of money that NBC has paid for the rights to the Olympics. Now, it turns out in 2011 that NBC paid a total of $4.38 billion for the rights to the next 4 Olympics. 3 years later, it bought another 6 Olympics for $7.7 billion. And at the time, it looked to many people like this is a sure thing. Now things have started looking like they could end up being a bit more of a burden than a boon. In the last 2 years, even sports has fallen victim to the same trends that are plaguing the broader industry. We're seeing major ratings fall as far as with the Olympics here, and I'm just going to go ahead and share what's on my browser here so you can see. I think they have a chart somewhere down here, and they don't. You know what? I thought there was a chart on here, so forget this. So in the last 2 years, just to reiterate, in the last 2 years, sports have fallen victim to the same trends plaguing the broader industry on TV. First, the NFL ratings fell. Now we've seen that the same is happening to the Summer and Winter Olympics. So we're getting the same hits that have happened to the NFL. And Dan and I in a previous episode covered a little bit some of the NFL ratings issues and some of our thoughts as to why those things are happening, could be happening. And I'm not going to get into that here, but just to let you know, that was in a previous episode that you can watch on YouTube or on our podcast. To continue with the Olympic story here, the viewership for the current Olympics on NBC is down 24% compared to Sochi among viewers aged 18 to 49, and that's the age demographic that's most coveted by advertisers. So basically that's the bread and butter. That's the 18 to 49 age range is the most important. It's the most important demographic because those are the people who are predominantly going to be watching these things, and it's almost a quarter decline, and that's compared to Sochi, which according to statistics was also down compared to the previous Olympics before that, which I believe was London. I could be mistaken, but I believe it was London. No, sorry, Rio. Was it Rio? No, Sochi was the previous. Sochi was the previous Winter Olympics, and Rio was in 2016. So Sochi was 2014. So here we also typically the Winter Olympics don't get as good of ratings as the Summer Olympics do, but this 25%, this decrease is compared to a previous Winter Olympics, the Sochi Winter Olympics. Now, the Rio Olympics did not fare any much better. Those ratings were down from 2012, and that was the London Olympics. And NBC reportedly had to issue during the Rio Olympics, had to issue advertisers make goods in the form of free ad time because initial ads didn't reach the agreed upon number of viewers. So this is I wouldn't call it a disturbing trend, but it is pretty interesting to see that we're seeing less and less viewer interest in sports in general. So it's not just the NFL, it's not just certain sports, but we're also seeing it with the Olympics. I know I used to watch the Olympics, but I think I forget. I stopped watching probably in the mid to late 2000s. So I'd catch up on stuff here and there, like the big events. Like I remember when Michael Phelps was going for his Olympic golds, and he had, he's collecting all those medals and stuff. I caught up on a few of those. But even then, it was mostly like on YouTube and watching it after the fact. I didn't watch it live. I just didn't keep up with the news on purpose so that I wouldn't know the result of the race. I also did similar things with the sprinter Usain Bolt, because I was really into the world records that he was setting. But again, I wasn't watching the full Olympics. I was watching maybe a few events here and there. And again, even when I was watching those events, it wasn't a live stream. It was more like I was watching a replay. So I don't know. I can't necessarily speak to the broad audience, but if that's any indication, people are becoming more accustomed to sound bites. They don't want to necessarily follow an entire event because, in all honesty, it gets kind of dry and boring, and nobody wants to sit through advertisements and dead airspace where there's not really anything happening. There's a lot of sort of like ups and downs. Even in football games, football is kind of like that, where you'll have commercials and then you'll have sort of like dead space between plays where the players they've either called timeout or they're in the huddle, and then they've got to get up to the line, and there's all this. So there's been studies done just of NFL football games where the actual action. So an NFL game is 60 minutes long, and the televised portion, so the entire televised game itself is somewhere around 2.5 to 3 hours. But of that time, I believe, I can't remember what the number was, but it was startlingly low, the amount of actual time where a play is happening. I think it was less than 30 minutes. It could be even less than that, I think. Again, I don't want to throw any numbers out here, too solid of numbers out here, because I can't pull it up myself right at this moment. But so when you're dealing with that, you kind of just want to see like, oh, what was the good thing that happened? What were the big plays? What were the highlights? Let's just catch that on ESPN later, or let's just catch it on YouTube later, even. For those of us who don't have cable, because I don't have cable, so I'm not going to be watching things live for the most part. And I do think that this is a very interesting conversation, again, because the Olympics ratings are down. We're seeing that it's very broad. I don't think that people are as enamored with these events as they used to be. I feel like, and I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's lost a bit of its mystique. I remember growing up and when I would watch the Olympics, and this is pre-2000s, before HDTV and everything. When my family, we would sit around, so this was in the 90s, we would sit around and watch the Olympics on our TV, on our 4:3 aspect ratio TV. That was probably no bigger than 20 to 27 inches. 27 was a huge TV to me back then. But, we would sit around, but I feel like that mystique is gone because things have become so accessible. And I compare it to what iTunes and now the streaming music has done to the music industry. Back in the old days, I would go to the store and I would buy an entire album. I would buy a CD of a particular band that I liked, and I was very careful about what I picked out because I wanted to make sure that it was something that I would enjoy, because I knew that's what I was going to be playing for the foreseeable future, because I was a kid and didn't have that much money. Now, and you don't have to go to the store to buy a CD. You just have to sign up for a music subscription and that costs, I think, like $10 or $15 a month, something like. I think it's like $10 a month from iTunes and Spotify. So you're seeing that's the less than the price of an album, and you can listen to any music that you want anytime that you want. And what that does, I think, is that it sort of takes the mystique away, because you have access to it anytime, anywhere. There's not that newness to it. There's not that there's not like a huge price that you have to pay for it. It's not bought with a huge price. To kind of quote Lord of the Rings. And I feel like when you don't have to pay a high price for things, you lose respect for them, because it's like you didn't have to put very much effort into it. And I think that's really what is happening now with TV in general, but with sports. It's just so easily accessible. You can watch and stream these things anytime that you want, that what's the point of watching these things live? Even with sports, even though it is kind of favors a live viewing that you must see while it's happening, a lot of people now will just watch it after, and they just won't pay attention to the stats, the news that show the scores. So you can watch it later, and you can watch it on YouTube or whatever, And again, I just think those things are sort of cannibalizing the live viewership audiences for for these events. Again, I think this will be an interesting thing to bring up next week when Dan's back on the show. Maybe we can have like a little bit of a discussion about it, and I feel like Dan would bring up quite a number of interesting points that we could really banter about and argue. So definitely can't wait for Dan to be back on the show next week. Moving on to our final story, CNN, scripted or not? CNN released emails from a network producer on Friday that contradict a Florida high school student's claim that the network scripted a question that he was supposed to ask at a television town hall event this week. Colton Hab, I hope I'm saying that right, a survivor of last week's mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, said Thursday on Fox News that CNN had initially asked him to, quote, write a speech and ask questions, end quote, for the event, but that a producer ultimately scripted him a question. CNN has denied this claim, but according to Business Insider, CNN and Hobb agreed on the question that he would ask at the town hall. His father, Glenn Hobb, pulled his son out of the event after the network refused to let the student read a lengthy speech. A CNN spokesman said, "It is unfortunate that an effort to discredit CNN and the town hall with doctored emails has taken any attention away from the purpose of this event. However, when presented with doctored email exchanges, we felt the need to set the record straight." And I'm going to share the screen here of this particular article because it's pretty interesting. We sort of are getting a bit of a battle of words here, where this student was shared the emails, and I'm going to scroll down here so we can see it. I don't know if that's going to be really visible on the video. You might have to zoom in. I don't know. But basically, he shared the email from the producer, and apparently it was a doctored email, screenshot, or however they screenshotted. I love how they just crossed out the end of the address, Carrie.Stevenson, probably at CNN.com or whatever, I don't know, but not very secure there, not very secure at all. But I'm not sure. This is one of those cases where I'm just not sure who to believe, because CNN themselves could have doctored their email that they presented in this article, or I guess they presented to the media. So, and of course, we're meant to take CNN's word for it, because Glenn Hobb and Cole Hobb can't defend themselves, because they don't have a massive news network where they can just publish a video and get everybody, to know the details of their rebuttal to CNN's spokesman, saying that they were trying to discredit them. So here we sort of have David versus Goliath, and in the case of CNN, they're the Goliath, and it seems to happen so many times where this occurs. We had an incident in the last week where a CNN reporter approached a woman's house and basically on live TV was accusing her of helping the Trump elections and being a Russian bot. And totally caught this woman by surprise, doesn't know what's going on, and basically making all these claims and accusations, and with no real proof. And this is just disturbing that a major news network like CNN feels the need to attack people like this. And again, we don't know who's telling the truth here. We can't. It's really difficult to sort of prove otherwise who's right and who's wrong. So I feel like you guys are gonna have to make your own decisions on which side you want to choose here. But and there we go again. I feel like that's the whole point of the news cycle now. That's what it's become, is about getting people to take sides and therefore butt heads. So if I were to have a conversation in the public domain with a person who's either a friend or a family member who has seen the same articles as I have but come to different conclusions, we're going to butt heads. And I can't help but think if that's not the overarching plan here, because I don't know, and granted I was very young, but when I used to watch news years and years ago, I don't feel like it was the same where it's like you have to sort of like toe a particular line or take sides on a particular thing. It's just like you believe what you believe, and it's that is what it is. And it's not necessarily right or wrong, but you know what? Now we have major news networks like CNNs and CNBCs telling us what is right and wrong, and basically being judge, jury, and executioner in a lot of these news stories. And it's just a conflict of interest, really. Like, what, you know, it just brings me back to the points that I made earlier with the Ancient Aliens show, where it's like, if you're watching the show, you're the captive audience, and they can tell you anything that they want and present it as facts. And you're going, you know, unless you do your research, you're going to believe what's presented to you. And while CNN is no Ancient Aliens, I do feel the same way about the whole situation. And that is, if I'm a viewer of CNN, I'm meant to just take everything in and believe everything that they say 100%, as if it's it's the gospel truth. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. There's been countless numbers of times when CNN's been wrong, and everybody's wrong at different points in time. But the point that I'm trying to make here is not that they're wrong on a lot of occasions, but the point that I'm trying to make is that because people are not perfect, because news networks are not perfect, we need to be fact-checking things for ourselves. We can't even check the fact-checkers, the fact-checking sites, because they all toe a particular line. If you look up on those fact-checking sites, they lean a particular direction. They might be left-leaning, they might be right-leaning, and you just have to figure things out for yourself. You cannot take the information that's given out in these domains as the truth, unfortunately, any longer. And sort of a little bit of I guess a teaser for upcoming shows. Dan and I are planning to start a new show on this very same channel, and it's going to be basically doing movie reviews. But what we're going to do is, instead of reviewing upcoming movies, we're going to kind of review like classic movies and cult classics, movies that you may have seen at one time but may have forgotten about. Some of them might be a little bit more obscure, but we're going to kind of like, the idea is that Dan and I are going to watch these movies, and we're going to sort of like revisit them and talk about the events and things that happened in them and little interesting tidbits that we picked up along the way. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if it's a fun thing, and if it sticks, we'll continue to do it. We're not 100% sure what our first movie is going to be, but if you guys want to share ideas for movies for us to review, please do so. Please do that again in the contact section, the comments section, and let us know what movies you want us to review. The first thought that came to both of our minds was probably doing something along the lines of Bad Boys, Bad Boys 2, The Rock, Con Air, things like that. Just kind of classic movies that aren't that old, but they're kind of classic to us, because they were the movies that we watched as kids growing up. So looking forward to that. We'll give you more updates and details as we get closer to doing that show. So with that, I'm going to kind of wind down the show. It's been really fantastic to do the show. It's not the same doing it without Dan by my side, but he will be back next week, and I'm really excited for that. Just want to remind you guys to, if you guys like this video, click the like button, share the video with your friends, share our channel with your friends, and please subscribe. And again, if you don't have time to watch us on YouTube and watch a video, by all means, we have our iTunes podcast, and on the other channels that I mentioned at the beginning. We're also on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn, and just be sure to subscribe to those as well. And we really welcome your comments and your recommendations as well. So we really want you guys to reach out to us and really give us your opinions on what we're sharing. Just please, if you do want to share your opinions on our shows and everything else, just go to our website and click in the upper left, click the contact button, and you're going to be taken to the contact page where you can fill out a contact form with your name and your information and your comments, and submit it to us, and we will receive that via email. And we would love to hear back from you guys. Any type of feedback we can get would be great, because we're just starting out here, and we want to make this show. We want to tailor this show to you guys and what you guys want to hear about. So we really look forward to that. Thank you for watching the show, and until next time, it's been Chris, and take care. With the shooting, and oh my god, that was terrible. Excuse me. Yes. Okay. Here we go.